Welcome, my pretties. Come in, have a seat as we sip the tea of reality. My name's Autumn,
And I'm Haley.
and Haley's gonna tell me another story.
Nipped in the bud. Brian Cohee. This is a recent case that I wanted to cover because it's so fucking pointless.
Oh, is this the one that we were sending back and forth the other day?
Yeah.
Are you serious? This is the
Yeah.
one we were sending
Yeah.
back and forth the other day?
Yeah, I was telling you a little bit about it. Yeah, I listened to that whole fucking documentary like 2, 3 times, and I'm like, this is just so. Oh my fucking god! I went back and forth with, could it have been prevented? Were the signs there? Could we have done, or not we, but could his parents have done more to fucking like get him help? Like,
Yeah.
in the end, when we get there, I guess. Oh, spoiler alert! Yeah, murder.
Hey, guess what? This is a true crime podcast. If you didn't know, there's always a trigger alert on our episodes. So
There's no child abuse, but there is definitely murder,
Abuse.
and it's fucking heinous. It's fake. So we're talking about the budding serial killer, 19-year-old Brian Cohee Jr., and the murder of Warren Barnes.
Can't believe this is the one that you were sending back and forth. I'm ready because I watched a little bit. I watched about I don't know. I was at work, so obviously I can't watch videos at work. So maybe about five minutes max on my lunch or something, and just what I was watching.
Watching this little fucking prick so candidly recall how he murdered another human being was not
And
what
then
I wanted to
everybody
do
was
with my
like,
afternoon.
everyone's like, he was a little morbid. I'm like, well, I mean, shit. I'm a
I'm a
little
little
more
morbid.
morbid, but fuck, I'm not gonna go. I'm scared of fucking bugs. What the fuck?
I am not scared of bugs, but I'm also not like, I wonder what it feels like to stab a motherfucker.
Although I picked up a snapping turtle yesterday, and he was very large, and I felt accomplished.
You are so brave.
I know.
Yes.
He hissed at me.
Yes.
I
Oh,
didn't know they could hiss.
this case is gonna hiss at you.
Dude, I already know. Let's get into it.
Are you ready? It's a snapping turtle. It's gonna bite.
Let's get into it.
On the afternoon of March 1st, 2021, Carrie Cohee would make a dreadful discovery. As she was looking through her son's closet, she would find a plastic garbage bag. Curious as a mother can be, she began to gather up the 2 white garbage bags and took them to the kitchen sink. When she opened one of the bags, she was met with a bloody human ear. She could investigate no further. She quickly called her husband Brian and told him to come home immediately. She then called Junior and told him he needed to bring the car home for his brother to use. Obviously, this was a ploy to get him home so the authorities could apprehend him. Once he was home, she called 911.
Honestly, that's really hard for a mom to do. So
Yeah,
I
kudos.
applaud her there, I guess.
I can't imagine. They did the right thing. They didn't cover it up, kind of like, what's that fucks? Paul Flores. I think his parents had a little more idea what he was doing. You know who I'm talking about?
Maybe.
Fucking date rapist. I don't know. We'll cover him one time. Anyway. Yeah, I just want to say, as a mother, how difficult I imagine that discovery and the subsequent phone call would have to be. Having to turn your son in because he murdered a random stranger for funsies. Like, my heart does go out to those parents. That's a fucking nightmare. Anyway, the authorities arrive at the Cohee home. Brian is waiting in the driveway. They approach him calmly, saying that his mom found something that concerned her enough to call them, and they asked if he might have an idea what that could be. I kid you not, this kid nonchalantly says, yeah, the human head and hands.
Just like
His own hands on his hips, and he just says it like he's delivering a punchline.
it's so crazy.
Speaking of punchlines, we should set one up for this kid. He has a very punchable face.
He does, bro. He looks like every guy that ever went, action.
And go see us on our Instagram at don'tyouknowpod.com.
Like, gee.
Now, this isn't Brian's first run-in with the cops this week. The day prior to his arrest, Brian would accidentally get his car stuck in the shallows of the Blue Heron River off the boat ramp. He flagged down a car to call his parents. They arrive, and the police were called to the scene. The car was stuck, however, and since it wasn't a crash, they let Mom take Brian home while Dad and the cops called some. I think both parents actually took him home while the cops waited for them to come back, and they eventually found a company willing to come out in the cold and pull the car out of the water in the middle of the night. When they come back, they're sitting in the car. Or before he leaves, however, The cops, of course, want to get the story from Brian. He says he just felt that he needed to get out and think, clear his head a bit. Parked on the boat ramp, and he just couldn't get the car back to the road, and instead it went into the water. Dad introduces himself, noting that he worked for the Life Jacket Foundation and they were often at the ramp, which would be a reason why Brian would be drawn to coming out there. They deem it as a simple mishap and work with the family to find a company willing to come out.
And they did.
hmm
They did. They
They,
came out.
they, they eventually found a company that was willing to come out, and while the car was being towed out of the river, one officer notices some red dripping off of the back bumper. He goes over to the parents, pointing out what he says looks like blood, and asks if Brian had hurt himself and not noticed. Mom calls Brian, and he denies any injury when she calls him. She waves it off as maybe surgery he had in his armpit had come open or something, and he just hadn't noticed it yet. The cop's a little suspicious, but he buys the feeble excuse and lets it go. The car gets towed home, and that's that. The next day, as Brian Sr. is going
Wait,
through,
let's reiterate that. They found blood on
they did
his
find,
car.
yes, it's so when we get to the end, and you're like, how close they could have been to just getting it all right there. You're like, maybe they just shouldn't have been like, oh, yeah, I guess it's nothing. Maybe his armpit cyst came
Right.
open.
Like,
Whatever. There was just so many telltale signs. The next day, as Brian Sr. is going through the car, he finds a wallet. It's all frozen. He lets it thaw and asks, Junior about it. And the grand gaslighter that he is, Brian Jr. told Dad where he found it at the boat ramp and was going to return it. Dad looks through the wallet and sees that the owner works for a place called People Ready, a man by the name of Warren Barnes, and calls them People Ready to leave his info for Warren to get his wallet. In the meantime, Harry is suspicious. What with the blood on the bumper and now a stranger's wallet in the car, and as we know, this led to her awful discovery of her son's secret trophies. I don't know. Warren Barnes was a homeless man who was well loved in his community. It didn't take it didn't take a missing wallet for his absence to be noticed. Several shopkeepers he frequented called the authorities to report him missing. One woman who saw him every morning when he'd stop in for a cup of coffee would tell the police that he was punctual and ever present at her coffee shop, that he would never just not show up, and she was concerned that he was ghosting her. Another woman, the owner of a local bridal shop, would set out a chair for Warren to sit on and read his books. Also met the police down at the boat ramp, voicing her concerns for his absence. The police went down to the boat ramp because that's where Brian Sr. said that the wallet was found. She knew he had been planning on coming back to the shop and said he would never go far enough down to the Blue Heron boat ramp. When they asked about who had called in the wallet, she said that it was a man who said that he worked for the Life Jacket Foundation and he had called People's Ready, who had then called her.
huh.
Life Jacket Foundation.
Mhm.
Brian Sr. Back to the scene. The cops confirm the contents of the bag and place Brian in the back of the police car. Brian is cool and cooperative despite his anxiety, even making snide comments as Grand Junction has been rather violent lately. As the officer is driving Brian to the station, they drive over a bridge where Brian remarks, it was under this bridge.
Right? He fucking says it, everyone. He literally
He's just showing off.
fucking says it in the cop car on the way to the.
And she has her body cam on too. So all of this is just being recorded. And I don't know if he was trying to be menacing to the cop or if he was going for casual conversation, a confession, whatever. The gal kept her cool and didn't give him the attention
She
that
did,
he
yeah,
was
she did
seeking.
exactly what the fuck she was like.
She's like, just keep talking, boy. Just keep talking. Brian works so hard to be polite, walking without cuffs and making sure to ask the cop if she is comfortable with that, as if he's anything other than a shithead. I mean, he is, but she'd have kicked his ass at the blink.
Oh, well, obviously, she's a fearless cop woman.
To separate the family for questioning, Perry is doing her best to hold it together as she recounts the last 2 days from the boat ramp to finding the remains of Warren Barnes. She was just cleaning and going through her son's closet because of some suspicious activity happening when she found a heavy bag and was confused. She took it to the sink where she investigated what was inside. She saw the bloody ear, and that was enough. She called Brian Sr. and told him to get home immediately. He was out picking up his son, Andy. Brian's brother, oh, I already said, yeah. So Brian's mom called Brian Jr. to bring the car home so that his brother could use it for a driving lesson. And per Kylan or his best friend or her mom, he peeled out of the driveway in a huff because he was over there hanging out and he didn't want to go home. When Senior was questioned, he revealed that he had made a horrific discovery of his own. While searching through the car, he found a knife in the glove box, and in the passenger door was the wallet. He recounts his call to people ready to leave his info for Warren to get the wallet back. When he asks Brian about the wallet, he said he had found it while he was out walking around and didn't think to mention it before because he was cold and worried about the car. He doesn't know who Warren Barnes is. Senior also didn't think the blood on the bumper wasn't innocently left behind by a cut. He says that he knew, but he didn't want to believe the story that was unfolding.
That's crazy.
To just like look at all of this evidence, because there was just there's reasons why this seemed suspicious. There
Right?
was stuff that like during their interrogations, like so much shit is. That's why I'm like, could it have been prevented? Like you should have just locked him up, but you never really want to believe it. You're like, I know he's fucked up, but he's like harmless fucked up, like a little fucking
Like, is
weird.
he just does he just have a dark sense of humor, or is he actually thinking said being that
Like, is
dark?
this for real? Is and
Right.
it was for real. But how can you know? Brian's interrogation was pleasant and cooperative, though his calm demeanor was a facade. Terry told officers that he was diagnosed ADHD autistic, so that could have contributed to his twitching and nervous mannerisms. But he couldn't have been more excited to tell his gruesome tale. Cops established through strategic conversations that Brian is coherent and able to tell right from wrong. He won't be able to use the insanity defense or claim he was inebriated or otherwise not cognizant of his abilities. Prosecution would later use this during the trial. Officers ask Brian what brought him to the sheriff's station. Douchey and braggadocious, Brian replies, I murdered someone. He wastes no time in revealing his sordid thoughts. He wants to tell his story. He wants an audience. He goes on to reveal his master plans. Quote, so, I mean, because I'm already going to jail for 15 years probably. He chuckles. The detective replies, I don't know. Take me back to the beginning. Brian, it's murder. I'm going to jail for 20 years probably, so I figure, why fight it? On the night of February 27th, it was a full moon, and I figured I could see, so, well, why not drive out? I'm in a bad state at the time. I have major depressive disorder, so I'm not thinking something positively. I've been cruising around for an hour, hour and a half. So I fill up on gas halfway through, and I'm eventually driving under the bridge near the sheriff's office. Unquote. He goes on to describe how he notices something near the railway, a long orange shape, and decides that it is a homeless person. He dons 3 pairs of gloves and takes his knife, methodically thinking through his next steps. He quietly approaches the sleeping man, pulls back the canvas, and stabs him in the neck. Warren begins to panic, asking him, What are you doing? Why? And Brian just continued to straddle him and stab him in the neck. Brian would coldly note that it was surprisingly easy. He thought that it would be tough, that there would be more of a fight. The man was old and taken by surprise. He claims that he was growling while stabbing Warren. He retold his heinous crime with candid detail and disgusting excitement, providing demonstration and sound effects, smiling as he confesses to murdering a man. It's as if he is putting on a show. In fact, early in the investigation, he asked the detective where people like him served their sentences, in prison or there in the county jail, acting as if he had joined some exclusive club for maniacs. I'm Dahmer, I'm Kemper, I'm Ridgway, I'm
Where would I serve
fucking
my
BT.
time? The jail or the prison? Bitch.
He said the whole ordeal lasts about a minute and a half. He took his last breath, a grunt, and his head were halfway cut off, and stabs all the while, not actually after I killed him. I just couldn't stop saying, stinky dirty,
The fuck?
unquote. What a fucking twat. Listening to way too many fucking crimes. He was stupidly wearing a Mike Myers mask, hoping no one would notice him murdering someone behind the bridge pillar. He stripped him of his clothes and cut his belly, laughing as he recalled how pink his guts were. Dude just casually talks about all of him in detail, even apologizing for his morbid humor. He then dismembered Warren Barnes, taking the head and hands with him. He went home, stowed the remains in his closet, washed the knife, and laundered his bloody clothes. There is no doubt Brian was of sound mind, premeditating the murder and the cleanup. As sloppy as he was in the end, he had every intention of continuing to murder for as long as he could. There's more to his dumb interview. He's a jackass. He threw that poor man's body parts around, creating some fucked up scavenger hunt. He confesses that he chose a homeless person because statistically vulnerable people were not investigated as well as other cases. Sucks for Brian because Warren was well loved and quickly missed. He just wanted to know what it felt like to cut off someone's limbs. There was no sexual motivation, though this can be argued by the show of excitement while retelling the murder.
Yeah, I had to give him some type of excitement.
Though he went through measures to not get caught, he was totally worried about the possibility. He had been planning this for about 6 months, stalking the town and looking for vulnerable people to kill. He would later reveal that he was on the boat ramp so he could dump Warren's body into the water to obscure evidence. That's when his car slipped into the river. Can you imagine how close they were to finding out about the murder that night? There was blood
Mm-hmm.
on the bumper from dumping Warren's torso into the water. It was right fucking there.
Mm-hmm.
Brian's internet history was a treasure trove of suspicious searches, one alluding to the possibility he was contemplating a home invasion, among other things such as serial killer cases, how people reacted to being held at knife point, and of course, how to scrub Android data. In 2019, a teacher would find In 2019, a teacher would find Brian's notebook that was full of crime info, serial killer profiles, and other troubling entries displaying obsession with murder, destruction, and depravity. He clearly pours his dark heart to these pages. In the margins of his diary, he would write that he aligned himself as neutral evil, as if playing a game. This notebook was far from the only foreshadowing of Brian's dark nature. In 2018, Douche Nozzle was arrested for the assault when he hit another student with a homemade mace made of masking tape for a speech that he was giving at school. He would later wield it to a developmentally delayed student at the bus stop. In 2019, he was suspended for intentionally causing a panic attack in a student that was known to have PTSD. He was a fucking menace. But the school was signaling but his mom said the school was singling him out when they said he had elevated risk for violence. It was an unfounded claim.
Hmm.
Despite all these breadcrumbs of his heinous behavior, Mommy would downplay it, shielding her psycho son from accountability. Brian was just being a boy. All that he did was clap really loud next to her. It was just boys being boys with nunchucks at school. Harry always had an excuse for Brian's concerning behavior. Daddy Cohee didn't think his son was capable of violence, but at one point said he caught his son looking just cold and empty, just disassociating. They also found a whole ass kill kit in his room and threatened to turn him in for conspiracy to commit murder. So, was he capable of violence in your eyes, or was the kill kit just for show and tell? Get your story straight.
Right.
They knew in the back of their minds their kid was loony, but it was hard to accept. The school pointed it out. They heard the rumors. It was obvious. But hindsight is 2020, and parents wear rose-colored glasses, so we can't see clearly in the moment. Watching this rag talk jovially, yeah, sure, about the murder and dismemberment of a human being was truly frightening. He is self-aware, methodical, and cold. He wants the attention and to be remembered. If he hadn't been so sloppy, if his mother hadn't found Warren, what could he have accomplished? What could he have accomplished? He goes on to confess that one of his original ideas was to hire a prostitute to torture and kill, but had changed his mind as it was too risky for a first kill, especially after his parents made him dispose of his kill kit. He couldn't get caught buying those items again, right? Doing their best to dig for a motive, detectives discern that Brian was more concerned with fame and notoriety. He wants to be known, leave a legacy. It's a possible motive. Fame, and because he felt like it. But is that all it could have been? Was there an underlying abuse? Head trauma? Surely something more than a teen simply deciding it was time to know what murder felt like. Brian was laughing as he says he didn't count how many times he stabbed him, but it was probably close to 40, in the head and neck area. Once through the ribs, mutilated this poor fella. He even gave him a Glasgow smile for no reason. You know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Warren asks, "Why are you doing this, Brian?" And he says, "I've been wanting to do this for a long fucking time." He just recalls it like it's nothing. He's so cold. He thought about cutting out his heart and disemboweling him, but he decided against it. His main concern was dismemberment, and he was upset that he had broken one of Warren's bones. He goes on to describe how he could see Warren's liver, small and large intestine. He wanted to keep a finger, but didn't get that far. Detectives asked if he took any photos during or after the murders, and he confirms that he did, but that he deleted them. He didn't want to leave any evidence behind. But nothing is gone forever, and the photos were recovered. Brian says that he didn't tell anyone of this murder, but that's not entirely true. Yes, he didn't straight up confess to anyone, but he did call his friend Kylan asking if he could come over and talk. Her husband, who had never really liked Brian because he was weird, said his story sounded like bullshit. James Bailey quote. But I remember he came over and was acting super weird, and he was like, I gotta tell you guys something. I think the police are trying to frame me for a murder. I found a body and was messing with it, and I got my car stuck in the river, and I had wiped blood that I had on my hand on the car, and now the tow truck guy saw it, and I think they're gonna try to frame me. Thought he was bullshitting. Back to James.
Hmm.
I thought, like I said, that at most he had found one and was just trying to be edgy because he found a body, or even to the point that he could have just been making it up because, again, I don't know him personally. Unquote. In the interviews with his close friend Kylan, she would describe him as an outcast that had a challenging time making friends and keeping them. He was edgy, always looking for the shock value, drawing challenge, drawing death scenes, being rude and a bully. He was looked at as odd but harmless. These raunchy, unfunny jokes never raised red flags, or always raised red flags, but were clearly being ignored. He had a fascination with the morbid, gaslighting everyone into believing he wanted to be a forensic investigator. He really just wanted to be Ed Kemper. Seriously, the way he calls on these serial killers, he puts them on a pedestal to be admired, and it's gross. Kylan was surprised, but not really surprised that Brian had killed someone, though she thought he would shoot up a gas station.
Hmm.
Everyone just chalked it up to being a weirdo and ignored some pretty vibrant red flags.
Surprised nobody's surprised.
Right? Everyone was just
Nobody's
like,
like, yep, I
we
get
knew
it.
he was going to do something. Just didn't really figure it was going to be this. He also skinned a dead groundhog to make leather. He was constantly in trouble at school. He killed a stray black cat in 2008 that he captured in a sleeping bag to beat and strangle. He broke its neck and decapitated it, storing it in a box for a while, happy as a clam to get away with it, developing his MO. Fury kill, decap, storing it no longer than 3 days before it stinks. This was actually no secret. There was a rumor going around that the missing cats in the neighborhood were because of Brian. It was passed off as a joke and ignored. Again,
That's crazy.
everyone's just like, "Oh yeah, there's a bunch of missing cats. You know, I saw Puss in Boots the other day, but like, I don't know that Brian kid was also outside. Probably nothing." During his interview, Brian will note that though he had always been drawn to the macabre, it was only in the last year that he gradually grew to wanting to murder. When he was diagnosed with ADHD, Terry was advised to further test because he could be prone to psychosis. But he chilled out, graduated, and kept on his medication regimen. He was in counseling for suicidal ideations, and through humor, he was high functioning Asperger's, additional schizo something. I don't know. He had many diagnoses. Regardless, he was cognizant, aware, fuck off, but insane, or but not sane, or but not insane. For fuck's sake. They noticed weird things about him. His father noting that Brian would often have a cold look on his face. Brian's mom runs a daycare out of the house and had to scramble to get the kids she was watching out of the house so her son could be arrested that day. So it's just a whole fucking bunch of chaos.
That's
Like, hey, can you come pick up your kids? My son's about to be arrested because I found a fucking human head in his closet. But everyone's okay. Um, still
the
paying
kids
full
are
rate.
okay.
Still
I
paying
am
full
not
rate.
okay.
I'm not
Please
okay.
come get them.
He was more interested in the act of his murder than who his victim was. All in all, Brian Cohee was a budding serial killer who thankfully was pruned before he could grow into something worse. Could it have been prevented, foreseen? I think it could have. A year prior to the murder, Terry and Sr. found Junior's kill kit that he had been assembling. It had hammers, shovels, knives, zip ties, duct tape, and a saw. It was all meant for hurting people. He convinced them, however, of other things. They made him throw it away, or they were going to call the cops and have him arrested for conspiracy. So they had a fucking idea. I am empathetic. Having to come to that realization that your child means to cause another human pain, it's tough. It's tough. It is. But through Brian's own account, he will say a teacher raised concerns about his strange behavior, and they didn't really seem overly concerned with what the teacher had to say. During an interview with one of Brian's high school teachers, he would claim that he wasn't the only class that he was having issues with Brian. And when confronted, Brian's mom functioned as if it weren't a big deal. Hey, he's just a strange kid. She went so far as to accuse the school of singling out her son. She had a binder of her complaints with the district about her son being bullied in his younger years. But come on, I mean, come on, mom. Multiple people were saying your son had really disturbing tendencies. You can't just ignore that with a blanket statement of my baby could have never. With his confession and the evidence found because of it, Brian's case was open and shut. He gave them the grisly detailed confession, providing all the proof they needed to throw him behind bars for life. In the end, his motive simply was curiosity. He said it from the initial interview in his driveway. He murdered Warren Barnes on February 27th because he wanted to know what murder felt like. None of his teachers were surprised that he was arrested for murder. They saw him going down a violent path. As often as they sounded the alarm, it fell on deaf ears. Brian was always just a weird kid who was never shy about what his sinister interests were. A quote from Brian. I thought it would be the best feeling in the world. Other than excitement in the moment, didn't really feel much. Perhaps pride, putting myself in the league of top serial killers, such as Bundy or Ed Gein. He was even joking at his booking shot. I feel like Hannibal Lecter right now. He does not look as frightening as Hannibal Lecter. Dude is a suburban dork, a twit.
Dude,
He really is. Just
yeah.
a blonde little fuck twat. I'll show you a picture in a minute. He pled not guilty by reason of insanity, triggering an evaluation. Docs asked him how he felt after some time had passed. Yeah, it was a thing that happened. It sucks, but it happened. That's what he said. He said it sucked, but it happened. It sucks because he's locked up. He's got no friends, no internet or video games, and no remorse for his victim. He's such a self-centered twit. During his trial, Terry would express her sympathy for the community and for Warren's family. Barnes's sister, Geraldine Shipp, stated he was a man who was loved by the community and the family. Nothing can replace Warren, but hopefully Brian Cohee can never ever have a chance to hurt someone else. Unquote. People who loved Warren Barnes lovingly called him the reading man because he was an avid reader. Those who knew him described him as a kind and diligent person. Furthermore, Judge Richard Gurley, who presided over this case, called it one of the most horrific he had seen in his 37 years with the criminal justice system. Brian Cohee's assumption that Barnes's death would go unnoticed was incorrect because the latter had many friends who adored and respected him. Furthermore, they installed a memorial sculpture in his memory in the location where he used to spend most of his time.
I love that.
Yes, it was fantastic. We'll post pictures of it, of course.
Sure.
After 2 days of deliberation, the jury rejected his insanity plea and found him guilty on 1 count of evidence tampering, 2 accounts of tampering with a deceased human body, 1 count of murder in the first degree, for the murder of Warren Barnes, 1952 to February 17th, 2021. He was 69 years old. This dumbass thought he was going to get 15 years, but he was given life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Ha ha.
He showed little to no emotion during his sentences. Often he was seen laughing. He is currently serving his sentence at the Buena Vista Correctional Complex in Colorado Springs. I hope his food is always bland and his showers cold and his mattress thin and lumpy. I want him to stub his left pinky toe on Monday and his right pinky toe on Wednesdays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, and Fridays are for constipation. Saturdays are for dirty blowjobs in the broom closet. And eat shit, Brian.
I hope he gets fucked in the ass every night because he's somebody's little bitch.
I mean, he will definitely need somebody to be his prison daddy because he cannot fucking find me. He just, hi, you're sleeping. Can I stab you in the fucking neck? Like, I don't know. He would have gone on to be an organized killer.
In the documentary, one of the first things he said is that he would do it again.
He absolutely would have done it again.
So
if his parents had not become suspicious and called him in, he would have escalated. I think he would have definitely gone on. He was just thankfully fucking stupid in his approach to covering up his goddamn tracks.
Didn't do a good job at all.
Thank fucking goodness. But you guys could do a good job if you leave a like and review there to help us get the word out about Don't You Know Podcast, where you can see us on all the socials at
Don'tYouKnowPod.com.
You can, yeah, that's the website. And the socials
everything,
are everything's at Don't You Know.
Don't You Know, but website is Don'tYouKnowPod.com. Email is
Don'tYouKnowPod@outlook.com.
And
all the socials are
Don'tYouKnowPod.com. Don't You Know Pod.
Yeah. So
leave a review and don't forget to lock your door.